Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to ask for your attention. We'd like to begin. We have this year, we have our largest panel for careers in OD, and we only have at this point a little over an hour. And I want to make sure that we get through our significant questions and then allow time for you all to ask the panel questions, because that's oftentimes some of the most significant information. But good afternoon, my name is Vicki Goenauer, and on behalf of my director, Mary Ann Tramelli, and our staff in Career Services, we'd like to welcome you to Careers in OD and the Meet the Firms networking event. Just to clarify, for those of you who've already checked in, you do not need to check in again for Meet the Firms. As long as you have your directory, you are good. At 6 o'clock, you're free to start moving through the rooms to connect with employers. I want to take a second to explain the motivation for offering this panel, and it is to familiarize you with designated roles within HROD. We have asked our alumni to return and share with you insight regarding their roles, the responsibilities they perform, the challenges and rewards of their roles, as well as share with you, prepare yourself. I will be asking the panel questions for which many of them will be responding to each and every one of them, and upon the completion of the panel, we will open the floor to questions. There is one edit to our program today. Unfortunately, Alpha Diallo was called away last night to a client emergency, so we were very fortunate to have Katie Jackson here to replace Alpha. Although she is not an alum from TC, I'm sure her insight is going to be equally important, so we'll want to make sure that we extend a great deal of gratitude to all of them at the conclusion of our panel today. So I want to quickly just acknowledge our panelists today. We have Jane Avatanta, we have Melissa Berry, Katie Jackson, Thomas Eskew, we have Lacey Hegum, and without further ado, we're going to go ahead and begin.
So my name is Lacey Hegum. I'm a Learning and Development Specialist at Momentum Worldwide, which is a marketing agency and total brand experience agency based in Soho. And basically, I'm currently a Learning and Development Specialist, but also transitioning into a talent experience strategist. So what that means is I basically support all of the professional development experiences, whether that's resources or learning programs, training, that kind of thing across the North American region. And then with the new role that I mentioned, I'm actually working more in supporting employee engagement globally and thinking about how we communicate our programs out to all of our employees and really try to increase awareness and engagement and participation in those programs.
Hi everybody, my name is Thomas Eskew. I'm a 2012 graduate of the MA program in Org Psych. My title is Senior Consultant at Deloitte Consulting. I work in the human capital practice, and in a very broad sense we work with clients, mostly large global companies, to help align their people and their organization with their business objectives. And so what that can mean can look very different. We do a lot of change management work, large business transformations. We might be working alongside with technology consultants or strategy consultants supporting the people aspect of a larger change. We also have people who do compensation and benefits consulting. We have people who really focus on the technical aspects of HR within human capital. And then what I do is within our talent practice, most of my work is focused on leadership development and succession. So I work with clients to define strategies and build programs for helping their managers and their executives become better at leading people.
Hi everybody, I'm Katie Jackson. As it was mentioned, I didn't go to this program, I actually went to Pepperdine University, but I'm really thankful to be here, and I still do think that we're all kind of united as an OD community, so it's wonderful to be here with you guys today. So I actually am an advisory manager at Ernst & Young, so EY, and I work in the people and organizational change practice. And I focus a lot on large-scale transformations, so helping to engage the people that will be impacted by those transformations, or helping with preparing those people through business readiness activities, followed by adopting the actual changes. Alongside that, I also work with the strategy practice often to do org design work, so operating model design and organizational design work to help through those transformations kind of build the building blocks by which those transformations will happen. I've been with EY now, my anniversary will be October 4th, at 4 years. Before that I was with IBM. So it's really great to be here, and I'll look forward to your questions.
Hi there, I'm Melissa, and I am a 2012 graduate of the OrgPsych program as well. I work at Ketchum as a organizational development consultant, and basically what that means is similar to a lot of these external consultants, I do that type of work, but internally for my company. Ketchum is a marketing communications group, and I basically work very closely with our executive committee to help with strategy implementation, organizational effectiveness, leadership development, a whole variety of things along the OD spectrum. And I've been with Ketchum a little over about 3.5 years now.
Hi everyone, I'm Jane Abatanta, and Percival Associates is my firm that I started in 1996. I'm a graduate of this program, of the OrgPsych program in 2008, and I think I was the last person to graduate under the 32 credit program. I took my time. But it's a great program, and my company is a management consulting firm, but it's very specific. My business is very targeted to financial services companies, specifically asset management firms, and even more specifically, hedge funds and private equity firms. What I do is communications coaching, presentation coaching, as well as marketing strategy and messaging. So what that means is when one of these firms is coming up with a new product, a new fund, they call me and say, can you come help us figure out how to sell it?
Okay. Now we're going to allow the panel to respond a bit more freely. So we'll just ask general questions, and those who are able to contribute will share with us information regarding the questions. Can the panel share with us and describe a typical day of your individual role, and what skills are most important to your success?
I'd love to take the what skills are most important to my success. Typical day, I'm not sure would be as meaningful for you all. For me, because I'm a sole practitioner, my business is, every day is really different. It's the good news and maybe a little of the bad news about what I do and how I do it, but every day is a new day and a very different day. So I'm either, and maybe some of you can relate to this, I'm either selling a new project or executing an existing project, and there's never any in between. There's no coasting, there's no downtime, there's maybe occasional vacation, but that's self-funded. Does it make any sense? So we can talk later if you want to about what it means to be in business for yourself, because I have a lot to say about that. But the skill that I learned here at TC, frankly, and that's been most valuable is the consultant's self as instrument. So have any of you taken practicum yet? Okay, so this means nothing to you. Okay, so the idea of whatever's going on in the room, and there's some professors here who will correct me because I could be really wrong about this, but here's what it means to me. How about that? Whatever's going on in the room with my client may or may not push some of my own buttons. I'm going to feel it in my body. I'm going to feel it either physically, I'm going to feel it emotionally, or sense something physically that goes on in the room. And what I learned here at TC is it's not about me. That somehow I'm figuring out what's going on in the room, what's going on in the system, and it's part of my job to either mirror that or just call it out or somehow use that in the process of my consulting or coaching. Does that mean anything to anybody out there? Are you with me? We got shaking heads here. Okay.
I would also say on a daily basis, it's kind of tapping in a way to what's going on, because every day is a different day. There's so many moving parts on these projects that I'm on, these large-scale transformations, and it's not only thinking about what your team's doing, but it's understanding how all the other moving parts are being impacted, because it's this larger system, right? And you're just one of the subsystems within it on these projects. And so not only is it the project team that you're kind of maneuvering, you're also thinking about your larger client system. So if all these complexities exist within your own project team, think about how a change that you're planning for your client is impacting all those other moving parts that you don't even realize. That's why stakeholder assessments are so important. That's why pulse checks and business readiness is so important, because you get tapped in, you have your ear to the ground, and then you can kind of be agile. And every day is a different day, but continuously moving forward to help them transform. It's very important.
think I would echo the idea that no day is ever the same, and I don't know that anyone up here would say they have a typical day, so to speak, but from a learning and development perspective, and tying it back to what I've learned here and what you'll hear over and over and over again, is that what you're doing each day is thinking about how you're supporting individuals and teams and the organization, and the needs for each of those levels are so different, and trying to make sure everyone's getting the attention they need. But I think one skill that becomes critical is being able to prioritize, because you have so much coming at you. So you need to figure out, what is the priorities, how can you kind of flex with the changing priorities and be able to still move things forward and not get held back. Because at least for my team, the learning and development is part of the larger talent or HR team in our organization. And at a marketing agency, the client always comes first. So getting attention and being able to move these projects forward is difficult. So resilience, I would say, is another key skill.
Now the panel can share with us the demands and challenges of working in your designated role in your organization. Can you share with us some information about that you feel the audience may want to know?
Sure, I'll answer this one. So in consulting in general, I'm sure Ryan and the others could probably echo this. You have to be really adaptable and ready to travel if that's what your client demands. New Jersey's not so bad, but I was just on a project for 5 months, flying to Austin every Monday morning, flying back on Thursday. And that can be, it's demanding, it can be challenging, it wears on you over time. So that's just something to keep in mind if consulting is a career path you're interested in. And also, it's not a 9-to-5 job. We're supporting clients on sometimes very transformative programs, things that their career might be on the line, so they're kind of on edge. They might send you emails at all hours of the day, and it's important that you're responsive to them, that you're in tune with what they need and able to deliver a response and support them almost any time of the day. So it's important to realize that it's not really sign in, sign out kind of job, but you're always kind of growing the business and always ready to support your clients and your teams after hours sometimes.
I think in internal consulting, there are definitely some similarities, but I don't travel like the Monday through Thursday the same way that these guys do. I travel maybe once a month for a few days here and there, but it's definitely not so extensive. However, the challenge for me, I think, is that I am constantly on. I can bump into my client in the ladies' room or anywhere in the office. So in that way, you always need to be prepared to answer a question or to have some sort of smart thinking. Like you're not really off in that way. And then the other demand for me is that my team is global. So similar to what Thomas said, you don't really shut off at 5 p.m. I would say it's similar for me in that way as well. I wake up to emails from Asia. I go to bed with emails from Asia. So it's definitely, for me, I've had to learn where my personal boundaries are with work and that I can't always be on.
The one other thing I would say, especially with consulting, I mean, projects can last from a month to 2 years, and so your role is always going to be changing as well. And you might get a call on a Thursday night after you roll off a project that says, "Okay, you're starting somewhere else on Monday," and it's not going to be the same role every time, and it's not going to be the same team, and it's not the same client or industry sometimes. And so what I wrote down here was role clarity. That's not always going to be straightforward for you. You're not going to have a job description for every project. And so it's being able to kind of, as you had mentioned earlier, tap into yourself, be able to gauge what's going on so you know how to be an instrument for that project in particular, I guess, if that makes sense.
I'd echo all of those points, and I'd add a couple. First of all, I think the boundary management thing is huge. If there's any note that you take on this whole panel, boundary management's the big one. But there's two other things that I think on the list of I wish somebody had told me kind of thing before I started, and that is very often the role of the consultant is to take the heat. So I've gotten very used to that. I'm very comfortable with it now, but this is my 18th year of doing this work. So that very often has nothing to do with it's your fault or not your fault, but sometimes it's just part of the role, that the consultant takes the heat. It's all the consultant's fault. I've been fired for no good reason. from my perspective. They had very good reasons in their perspective. But no, but it's that idea that you get to take the blame. And so the corollary to that is very often you need to subjugate your ego. So your ego is, I know I'm right, I did all the work at TC, I got A's. But guess what? It didn't matter. And they either weren't ready for change, they can't deal with the existing change, they thought they were ready, whatever it is, it's your fault, and you need to kind of sort of suck it up and deal with that. And that's been challenging over time, and I find that's one of the greatest challenges to some of the people I mentor on this space, is getting to that place where they can get cool with that.
Okay, great. We touched upon skills briefly, but I'd like the panel to elaborate a bit more if they could. Describe the skills, academic preparation, or experience necessary for students to be viewed as quality candidates.
All right, I'll jump in. I would say, my piece of advice would be to really just do as many internships as possible. I think it's the best way to get experience, to see what you like, to see what you don't like. I think it's also really great to be doing these internships while you're in school. I loved being able to go into work saying, oh, we read about this theory in class and how we can apply it, which I also then learned that bringing in academic theory into work isn't always the best thing because the client doesn't always understand it, but taking that concept and making it digestible and usable for your client is a very important skill. But just internships, even if it's not your dream internship, I would say just to get your foot in the door and do it for a few months. There's always a usable kernel that you will get. Just absorb as much as possible, because once you start working full-time, you don't have that option to just flip-flop and do all different things. So I would definitely try to do as much as possible while you're in school.
From a learning and development perspective, the kind of three main skills that kind of jump out to me as being something that might be slightly different from the consulting, although the third will be very aligned to consulting actually. But if you have a chance to actually get facilitation experience of any kind, even if it's just getting up and presenting for your group in group classes, like anytime you can get up and have some way to prove out that you have the ability to stand in front of a room and deliver, obviously that's a lot of times people's biggest fear, but you get more comfortable with it. And if you're looking to do teaching, even in content design, being able to have that experience of actually teaching really informs it in a different way. So that's one thing. I think also just as a professional in general, figuring out how you consider the look and feel of your materials. So yes, I'm in a marketing company, so I'm always thinking about that probably at a different level than other companies. But if you can put together a really nice looking PowerPoint deck and a Word template that looks really nice and is organized, that makes a big difference for any client internally or externally. So that's kind of just a small thing, but a little pet peeve or side note for me. And then the last thing is just confidence in being able to ask questions. So a lot of times people come to you and they think they know the solution, but you really have to be able to say, okay, that's great, that sounds really wonderful, but what are we really trying to get at here? What's the bigger objective? And being able to kind of push past that initial request and dig deeper. So there's a lot of great classes in the program that help you do that, which I think we'll talk about soon, but that would be one other skill I would mention.
Yeah, one thing that I definitely look for in resumes is for, you to demonstrate that you can take a piece of work and really own it and lead it through from start to completion, because a lot of what we do is to show up in new situations, maybe kind of ambiguous situations, and put structure around it and figure out a solution and put together a path to get to that solution. So whatever your experiences are, demonstrate how you were able to show up and really show leadership and take something through from start to finish and deliver a result. That's really important, more so than the actual roles that you actually had.
Oh, and I just wanted to add one thing to that. I think that any opportunity you have to collaborate with other students in the program on whatever it is, if it's a study group, whatever. One of the great experiences I was able to have in one of my classes was to do a term-long project with members of the Eisenhower program. So these were individuals who were associated with West Point, well, West Point cadets, and who I know nothing about that and know a lot more now, but it was anybody that could talk to me about a completely different experience was really helpful. And then finally, the idea of understanding yourself in groups is really important skill. So this is not necessarily something you can demonstrate in a resume, but trust me, it's going to be really important to you in the first 6 months of any assignment that you're given, is understanding yourself and how you operate in a group.
I'll be very quick. The one thing that I actually really love about UI is how diverse they are. And so when I look at a resume, it's not always that I want this cookie cutter resume. I want the different perspectives, because then the world we live in is so different. The clients that we serve are so different. We need to be able to push one another's boundaries and be able to expand our thinking. And so when I look at a resume and the people I've seen coming into UI, they all have different backgrounds. Somebody that we brought on last year was working for the United Nations over in Italy, and maybe they didn't have change experience, but the experiences that they had somehow we could pull from, and I really like to be around those type of people, and those are the type of teammates I want to have. So that leads to me saying, figure out your brand, start to build your brand, and every project might be completely different, but find a way to tell your story so that the experiences you're having are unique to you, and I'm going to want them. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of the pep talk I give myself as well throughout project to project. How does this all tie together? What do I stand for? What do I have to offer that's unique, that is authentic as well?
I'd like to just digress on that from the notes, and Thomas and Katie have touched on something that many of us in the room have taken on as a project in the last 2 weeks, and that is working on the resume. Can you speak to and elaborate a bit more about what you would recommend at this stage the students include on their resume? We have a mixed bag of candidates in the audience. We have folks that have several years of experience. We have people who have HR experience. We have candidates who have they're career changers. We also have candidates who are coming in right from undergrad. So can you take a moment to just talk a little bit about what you would recommend they include on the resume, what skills, and maybe touch upon what are transferable skills?
Yeah, I think what I said earlier is very important, but no matter what your previous roles were, be able to show what kind of impact you had.
Results.
Yeah, what results did you deliver? That's really important. And I know I'm not directly answering your question, Vicki, but aside from the resume itself, cover letter is really important to me, because if I get a stack of resumes, a lot of them look very similar, but it's through the cover letter that I think candidates are really able to stand out by tying together their experiences and weaving a story around it and showing me their passion around why Deloitte, why human capital consulting, and how do all of their past experiences kind of lead them to apply to this job today. So cover letter is very important. It's not something to overlook.
I also think the cover letter is really important because it's really our first view into you. This is your first writing sample that you are giving to a possible employer. And I think in all of our jobs, no matter what role you're in, writing is such a huge component that I would make sure it is the most perfect, like go-to career services. I have gotten so many cover letters and resumes with typos and things that just don't make sense, and it's so important. Even just a peer review is so helpful. I would really strongly suggest that.
I would also just say that one kind of tool or trick that you can use is looking at looking at the job descriptions or example resumes of the job you're actually looking for. A lot of times you can really pull what are the skills that they're seeking, and you can figure out how to embed that in your resume. Even if you don't have that exact experience, you can think about what's that. When I was in Italy, what was I doing that was exploring or working with a team? There's so many different things you can draw on, but if you know what they're looking for, it really helps you cater it to those skills.
When I write down something I've done, well, so what? I did this, well, what did it lead to? What's the impact? And it could be anything, right? So if you apply that to anything that you're experiencing, I did this, I was working at a nonprofit and I worked on this, well, so what? Well, I was able to impact these people in these ways and make this type of contribution. So think about it, and it doesn't have to tie to an OD experience or a change management experience. It could be anything. So just put yourself out there and be excited about what you can provide to a company and offer.
And hopefully what you're figuring out from all these comments is that one resume is not going to do it, one cover letter is not going to do it. It has to be tailored to who you're applying, where you're applying. Hopefully that's obvious.
See, I told you. I want to go back. A few of the panelists touched upon courses taken here at TC. And I'd like the panel to share, from your experience, what classes would you say prepared you for your role, or what class had an impact on you in your development? What would you recommend they take for X?
All right, there are a lot, so I'll just say one. For me, it was definitely the functions 1 and 2. I think it is so important to be able to speak the business language. We don't operate in a bubble of OD consultants, but we all are very much embedded in whatever business, whether it's internal or external. I think it's so important to really be part of the business, understand, to read budgets, to understand things like the profitability numbers and margins. And it's not things that, I'm not creating these things for other people to read, but you have to understand them. You have to be able to speak to people about them and sound like you very much know what you're talking about. So functions, and I'll say one more. Professor Temlock's class, which I took in my last semester, it was, we think it's called experiential learning in leadership and management or something like that. It's a very small class. I think there are 12 of us. And for me, it was one of the most intimidating classes in that we did a few activities where you actually were recorded, but we made videos, and then the class would give you feedback on the spot about it. And it was pretty terrifying, I'm not going to lie to you, but it was very much a learning moment, and actually watching yourself back on these videos was really, really informative. So take both of us.
One of those that was very important to me was also in the adult learning program. It was called Human Resource Development, I believe. It was with Lyle York's. It was a fantastic course, and we worked with a live client. It was Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, but it was very relevant to the type of work that I was applying for at Deloitte, and I was able to speak about a couple of examples in my interviews directly from that course.
And as you might have guessed, I would make the case for group relations in all of those classes. And Warner Burke's course in leadership, I assume he's still teaching, it's required. And I already talked about practicum, but I forget where it is. Gina, where do you do the AK Rice conference? That one. So group dynamics, AK Rice conference, need to do that too.
Yeah, and the last one, which they all stole all my answers already, but the last one is unique. Is the practicum in change management and consulting.
Yeah.
Similar to group relations, it's kind of a good continuation of that. Both extremely challenging. You have to be willing to put yourself out there to really get the learning out of it. But if you do, it is so, so worth it. It's like invaluable. So I would recommend, hands down, do both of those.
And one more. I actually took a course in the business school, which was really valuable. It's interesting to see what people outside of TC think about our field. I was in a class with a lot of MBA, MD students, and a few other combined programs, and so I was really the expert in the room. It was an org change class, and it was just very interesting to see. I was thinking like, no one else really knows this the way I do, and it was a good first insight into what a lot of my clients know on this topic, which isn't all that much.
Okay, one more question for the panel, and then if our org psych members would like to come down to help us, we're getting ready for a Q&A. One more question for the panel. career growth potential for your role. What are some additional career paths a professional could transition into from your role, or maybe what is typical for professionals to do upon having been in your role?
Well, I can, I've been asked many times to go inside, to come to work for a client. I've declined to do that because I think once you do that, you can't be heard anymore, but that's a whole different conversation we can have together. But that is one thing. You could go off on your own and then find a client who wants to bring you inside to do the work that you can do. There's also an interesting thing that I've been asked to do and have done, where you actually become the outsource OD person for your client. So you still maintain, at least for me, the autonomy, but there's a consistency in that revenue stream, which is wonderful, and also the relationship, obviously. So those are two small ideas.
I think within EY, it's actually been quite an interesting journey for me. So my background's actually in supply chain management, and when I was at IBM and even for a few years at EY, I was in the supply chain practice. But what's awesome is that I've had this flexibility to kind of, transfer when I wanted into people and org change as I went in to do my master's program and started to learn about that. I've been on multiple strategy projects, and sometimes they're saying, hey, come on over here. I think, when I think about it, it's not just vertical. The possibilities are endless, but it's also these kind of horizontal shifts. And then I think you all relate to this as you start to learn about who you are as a leader and kind of tap into who you are. To me, I realize I'm a relationship builder, right? And I think a lot of us can relate to that. We really love people. So maybe I'm not the person implementing the project. I'm the person connecting the dots, connecting the relationships, the person who's really keeping the kind of the glue of the project there. So there's so many different options, and that's why you just have to have really good self-awareness so you can understand what you can add to that bigger picture.
I would just add, for learning and development, when I first started in this field, I definitely didn't realize how interconnected learning and organizational development and HR can really be. And so I think what's great is that if you're in the right place, there can be a lot of overlap or lateral movement where you can expose yourself to different parts, and you could start in learning and move into OD and then move into HR generalist. There's a lot of kind of back and forth that you can do. So I would say what's essential for you, if you're interested in that, is to stay connected and really integrated, because if your team is siloed and they're all separate sub-teams, in order to have that lateral movement, you need to be, asking questions, trying to understand what they do in their role so that you can have that opportunity for movement laterally and up the ladder as you progress in your career.
Okay, well, I think at this time we're going to open the floor to questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and one of our Odyssey members will come up and allow you to speak into the mic so we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. We hear a lot about consulting, about the long hours and the travel that seems to go on for a long time, and the endless connectivity. But what I'm really interested in, what has been the most rewarding aspects of consulting, and how has it helped to develop your network of peers?
I'd love to take that. Just again, my role is maybe a little less conventional, but it's actually seeing the light bulb go off over a client's head. That's the best thing. When the light bulb goes off and they get it, and in my field, they usually get it when they're really fast, which is because they're masters of the universe types, but they get it really fast. And the light goes off, and you actually see change right before your eyes. That's really fun.
For me, as being internal, I think it's really, really awesome that I get to see and be part of whatever change is happening throughout the agency. So I'm just thinking of a new creative process that we recently, it's a marketing agency, we recently rolled out a new creative process, and it took a while to actually gain some footing, but it's happening now, and I've been very much involved in the day-to-day, like how is this going to work, and it's happening. And I was recently in our Chicago office, I heard people talking about it, and I saw this infographic that I had made, like hanging up I was like, oh, people are talking about this. This is real. So that's been very rewarding for me. So since we work in a marketing agency, it's basically our process in which we come up with ideas. So I'm not sure if this is very interesting to all of you, but basically we move from research to insights to strategy to creative, and it used to be a little bit more disjointed. And I helped with the process and bringing the people involved with the process. And then the second part, actually helping to operationalize that in each office at Ketchum. So basically, sometimes we didn't have all the research people in the right places. So who are these people? How do we identify the skills that we need to actually make this work? Who kind of similar to what you were saying for like connecting those dots is sometimes hard in a huge global organization. And so seeing it come together has been really, really rewarding for me.
So I think that, yes, consulting can be challenging. And some days you're just like, what am I doing? I feel like life is like that, right, sometimes. But there are moments, and I'm about to sound super nerdy, but I'll be walking through the airport after a week and like, I cannot believe this is my life. This is pretty cool. And it's just, you get to be so creative and innovative, and you push your boundaries and you push others' boundaries, and like you get to watch people develop, you get to watch yourself develop. I'm a big fan of possibilities and helping people discover theirs. Again, I'm cheesy and nerdy, but I feel like consulting provides that forum to do so. So to me, it's worth all the blood, sweat, and tears to have those moments where I remember why I'm doing this. So I don't know if that's a substantial answer, but that's truly how I feel. So.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the most gratifying moments come from seeing the impact you can have on your individual client counterpart. A lot of times they're under a lot of pressure to deliver results on a project. You know, they might have a promotion riding on whatever the outcomes of the project you're helping them on. So being able to bring some calm and clarity to their life and help see them be successful, for me is probably the most rewarding aspect of working on any project.
It's when you have the challenges that, because part of your question was about the growth part of what we do, and I think that's when I've really grown the most. And the hard part for me about that is just kind of remembering, oh yeah, growth moment.
Another question?
Thanks. So this is really to juxtapose the two experiences of being a consultant and being someone who collaborates with an in-house client. How does that limit your creativity? I mean, or does it at all? Is there really a difference between having to deal with sort of pushback from external clients versus internal clients, and is that limiting?
One of the reasons I've stayed internal is just because I love the depth of knowledge that you get and the relationships that you maintain by being around and being in-house. I think that's something that I really value, and you're able to not only create the structure, but then help implement it and then watch it succeed and then help it change again. So I think that's something that I really enjoy from the internal side.
We don't see our EY colleagues very often, and when I'm around them, I'm like, I love these people. This is so fun. Why don't I work with them all the time? Because I'm out on a client. So the way that I've mitigated that is that we have a lot of internal projects as well. And so for this year, I'm working on the emerging services. I'm helping us to identify our go-to-market strategies on new service offerings, and have a really awesome team that I'm working with. And so I'm finding, kind of being proactive about making sure I still feel connected and don't always have to cut those ties after my projects are done. And it's also a really great way to kind of feel connected and network with your own group, so that you have more experiences and you're starting to kind of build your brand. So.
I think that's a great question for yet another reason, and that is that you'd want to think about where your personality, where you're best suited. I think Ryan makes a really key point about the idea of being able to perhaps be more provocative as an external consultant versus as an internal consultant, and whether or not that suits your personality. Something to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a fine line. I mean, we talk about this a lot when you know what really the right thing is is for your client, and then still wanting to protect your personal brand. You don't want to come off in an unlikable way. But so it's a fine line, and it's definitely something that is a constant conversation.
Another question?
Hi, I just have two related questions. First, what components does the typical interview in the field of OD consist of? And second, as students, how should we best prepare for it? Thank you. Sorry?
Would you repeat the second question?
The second, as students, how do we best prepare the interview in the field of OD?
So one component of our interview process, it's probably similar to a lot of other consulting firms, is a case. And it's important because we have a limited period of time to get to know you in an interview, and a lot of our job is coming up against unfamiliar situations and figuring out a solution, or at least an approach to developing a solution. So a case is like a really compacted, simulated way of letting you demonstrate your critical thinking process and how you could take a lot of information that you hadn't heard before and make sense of it, synthesize it, and come up with a potential solution. So it's a very important part of our interview process, and I think it really just takes practice. So when I was at TC, I attended a few different workshops. I know Odyssey usually has some kind of program where they have peer practice or have people from consulting firms come present on the anatomy of a case interview. But once you have a good framework and an approach for doing a case, just spend time practicing. Once you get comfortable with approaching it, get a buddy, spend a couple hours every week or two just presenting a case response to one another, because you just get more comfortable with it over time.
And when you practice, videotape yourselves. Do it, and then watch the video.
It's uncomfortable, but it helps.
It's awful, but
Okay, another question?
Hi. So I have a kind of a more practical question. I just kind of like want you to put yourselves in our shoes for the moment. And in like 40 minutes, we have like this huge event going on. I just want to get your responses on, let's say you walk in the room and you're kind of nervous, and then you see your possible future employer. What would be one or a few of the most important questions that you would ask them?
For me, I think in any consideration of a future employer, culture is really, really important. So I don't know if this is your first question, but one question I would make sure you ask is, what does it feel like to work there? What is their favorite part? What are they excited about when they go to work every morning? Because those are the things that are going to get you through those long, like, blood, sweat, and tears, is that cultural fit. So any job you're looking for, it should be a good fit with both of you if you're, going to be successful there. So I would ask something in that realm.
And actually, to that point, Lacey, I think, would you recommend that people ask the question, what kind of person succeeds here? What constitutes success? How do people fit in? That kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that would definitely get at it for sure, and help you know if that's a place you'd want to work.
And I would say don't be afraid to ask kind of the tough questions. I mean, we all go through that, where those initial questions we want to ask, and we're like, oh, no, I can't ask that. I need to make a good impression. But ask some of the questions that are truly going to get you the answers that you're looking for, because you want to make sure that it is a good fit. I'm not saying ask questions that are not appropriate, but you know what I'm saying. Like the ones that are truly going to help you understand if it's a culture for you. Because I think I've made this mistake in the past where I've wanted something so bad that I kind of just glazed over the questions that would have actually made a difference for me, because in the end you don't want to not fit where you want to be, so you can succeed as well. And I don't know, that's one of my biggest lessons learned, is that I've stopped being afraid to ask the questions that allow me to truly feel comfortable where I'm going to be and succeed.
When you're kind of, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and honestly, those kinds of questions are going to get your employer's attention. It'll make you stand out to have that kind of confidence.
And you're modeling behavior. I mean, if you're looking to be a consultant, you need to be able to ask good questions and find out about the other, whoever the other is, person, individual, coaching client, organization, whatever it is. So you're starting from right there. That's where the interview starts, I think. I also think, I don't know if you all do programs here, but handshakes matter. Look the person in the eye. I mean, do I need to go through that? I mean, this stuff really matters. And if you think it doesn't, I'm here to tell you you're wrong. All that stuff really matters. And talk to me later if you want more detail about that.
We talked about that last week, the week before, in our 2 workshops. But thank you. But see, again, I told you. Do we have another question? No questions?
It seems that all of you have personal experience with hard questions. Can you give us specific hard questions that you've asked?
Specific hard questions?
Questions that you didn't. Questions that you're, just concrete examples of what you mean by uncomfortable questions.
In general or in the interview process?
When we're meeting.
The Meet the Firms thing. Yeah. Meet the Firms thing.
Good question. There's a difficult question. I'm trying to think of an example. I think in some cases it's like that gut check. It's like, ooh, I'm already kind of sensing that I may not be a fit for this, but I'm going to pretend like I am because I really want a job. Got to ask those questions to confirm whether or not that's really what you're going to want, because you have tons of opportunities, right? So it's, to me, and I've been in that situation, it's like, oh man, I might regret being a systems integration consultant at IBM, but I really want a job as a consultant. And then I had to go through this process of really truly discovering that I was more of a people person and not a systems person. And so I don't know, you're going to have those intuitive moments where it's like, I got to push this further. I got to take that step. Stay in tune with who you are and ask those questions. So I can't give you a specific question, but I think you get my point, right?
I can. I think you should ask people about, again, what constitutes success here? What kind of person really does well at this firm? Why? Why is my favorite? And when you get an answer, my personal favorite is, say more about that. Whatever that is, say more. I'd also ask about, in the past 3 to 6 months, what's been their most rewarding experience with a client? And then I'd ask what's been the least and why, and say more about that.
Another question? And Eliza, we'll come back to you in just a second.
As an external consultant, how do you break through some of the, I guess, walls that other departments may put up that didn't hire you, or issues that you have, finding the true issues that maybe the company isn't wanting to make visible to you?
Well, I actually just had this situation, so let me just tell you about the experience. Part of it is a sense you get. So there's a team that wants to hire you and they're ready to go. And then you're asking about some of the other people in the organization, and people defer and you sort of never get to meet them and all that stuff. Data point. Make sure you pay attention to that. And then I also, there's the group that really, so what happens to me is the marketing people call me up, they say, you gotta come fix this guy, he's blowing up my deals. And the guy, and it's always a guy, doesn't really think they need coaching, want coaching, don't have time for it, I do what I do well, these marketing people don't know anything, blah. And so I always ask for a meeting with that person up front privately, and I ask them, do you want to do this? Why not? Why? What do you think you need? Whatever, etc. So the degree to which you can be attuned to the data that you're getting in the room from whomever, I think that's really important. And that gets back to the other, you just need to ask a lot of people, different people, the same questions. So it's almost a structured interview that you're doing as an external consultant for them.
everything is data. That's my motto. Everything I take in, and I think kind of going back to our initial point, self as instrument, so important. Once you can get out of your own way, you're able to truly see what's going on, you're more aware of what's going on around you, and then again, it's all data, so what do you do with that? I mean, I feel like last year we were in a room and the CFO of this organization was yelling at my partner, you know, just yelling at him, and I felt like a fly on the wall, like I shouldn't be here for this, and I think I had just maybe taken a course and it was on, you know, naming the resistance. I was like, this guy's resisting something, but what is it, right? And I think the intuition in me being very like this OD person was like, is everything okay? You seem really tired. I actually called it out. Instead of whatever he was yelling at this guy about, it was just making the observation, are you okay? And he said, actually, no, I haven't been sleeping. I've been staying up all night for the past 3 weeks. We're going through this major transaction. He put the real stuff out on the table. He was just, it was a facade. His emotions were coming out in a different way. And so, but I was in tune, right? I was able to do that because I could put my stuff out of the way and really focus and then make the call. And sometimes it's a tough call, right? But know when to do it and when not to. And it makes a difference. Yeah.
Eliza.
Kind of a related question. So, as consultants, when you, as someone was mentioning earlier, when you come back Thursday and you're immediately told you have a new client on Monday, it sounds like you gather a lot of your data about the new clients on the ground, if you will. But do you study before you get there? How do you learn what you need to know, and do you feel prepared about that company when you walk in the door?
You know, one thing I always do before I go to a new client that I haven't worked with is read like the last annual report and see how they're talking about their business and what their issues are and their challenges and whether, you know, what they're doing that's successful and what's not. And generally at a place like Deloitte, there's someone in the firm that's either worked there or is serving that organization as a consultant. So, you know, find out who those people are, getting on the phone with them, and just getting their perceptions about the client before you show up on the ground is really important too.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Thank you so much. I was just curious, in transitioning from school to your full-time positions, what has been the most challenging aspect? Because I feel that school is very, in a way, it's structured, and we know that we're going to be in school from X time to X time. We're going to be given this grade. This is what we have to do in order to get the grade that we want. So I was curious, what is the most challenging aspect of that transition into full-time employment, and what have you, maybe what strategy you might have taken to address that type of issue?
So I can't speak from a place of direct transition because I did part-time school and full-time work the whole time, but I can say two things into moving out of school and just becoming full-time work and some of the differences. And one thing I would say is, you mentioned getting an A, right? So in school, you get direct feedback at set times for set projects, and that's really easy. But when you're in the real world, getting feedback can be a lot harder than you would ever expect. So you have to be ready to ask your manager or your team or your client for feedback because they might not always give it. And feedback is going to be what enables you to grow and get better. So being willing to ask for feedback is one thing that I've noticed is a big difference. And the other thing is like a work-life balance piece for me. So I was working full-time and doing school in the evenings, and then school was gone in the evenings, and so then I started filling it in with work. And so you want to be careful. Again, boundaries is something really important to think about as you transition.
Okay, well, I think this concludes the panel part of tonight's presentation. I'd like for everybody to give the panel a round of applause. Thank you so much for the insight and being here. We appreciate it. And we do have one more very special guest with us this evening who I think you all know by now, and that is Dr. Warner Burke. Professor Burke's extensive consulting experience spanning 4 decades has been with a variety of organizations in business industry, education, government, religious, and medical systems. His latest book is the 4th edition of Organization Change 2014, which was recently published by Sage. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Burke to share some insight with you.
I know some of you, or at least recognize you and so forth, but coming in and looking around the room, this time I didn't recognize anybody. I mean, you look nice. You don't look like a grubby graduate student. You know? Just 3 points for your consideration with respect to putting yourself on the market, so to speak, or at least exploring it for the time being. And it made me think that we had a discussion in our faculty meeting yesterday, in our program faculty meeting, about some research that Alyssa Perry has been doing and so forth. But it centered around what do we like about our politicians? And the answer, of course, is not much, but what do we pay attention to? It's 2 things. One is competence, and the other is something we might call warmth. Do we like the person? With respect to politics, it's important that we feel like the person who's going to occupy the position knows what the hell she or he is doing. But at the same time, we would kind of like them. And I don't know if I should pick an example, but Hillary is really quite competent. That's the example. Warming up to this lady is tough. Anyway, so what am I trying to tell you? When you meet the firms tonight, smile. You know, just act like you have warmth whether you do or not. Just try to. Your competence is a given. You're coming through this program. That's a given. So you got to work on the warmth side of yourself. Okay? Number 2, use language. You've heard me say this from the orientation session earlier this month. Use language that reflects hot topics. So when you're being interviewed or you're interviewing the people here, use language that you know is hot, the latest thing. So tonight I would suggest that if you can work it into a sentence, somehow say, I started to say transcendental meditation. It's what TM used to stand for. TM stands today for talent management. So put that in some sort of form of a question or a statement you make. Use that term. And the other term you got to get into your sentence or whatever is agility. So those 2 things are right now the 2 hottest topics that's going in our particular field. Here's what not to do. It's important. You go to the person at the booth or whatever, and you say something like, I wrote this down to make sure I get be clear about what I don't want you to do. You say, hey, you guys doing anything like let's keep blocking on it, transcendental. Are you guys doing anything with respect to talent management? Dr. Burke says it's one of the latest, hottest topics. Don't do that. Understand? All right. Good. Even though it's true. All right, last point, and the most important one of all. And that is the main thing that you really want to be clear about in terms of the firm you might join one of these days, or maybe you're already in one and you're in part-time like you were saying about yourself earlier. Forget job security. We know that's a thing of the past, so you don't have any say about that. So forget that. So what do you really want to know? That should be at the top of your list in terms of what firm you join. It is whether or not the firm that you join is going to provide opportunities for you to learn and grow. And if those opportunities are not there, then it's just a job. And that the firm is only looking for an extra pair of hands. If you can afford to avoid that option, do so. Because what's in it for you is really your continuing learning and growth. An example of that is that, and the last point I'll make, is my daughter went through this program. I mean, being my daughter, she sort of got tuition waived, you understand, so I'm sorry about that in your case. But anyway, that's what she did the work. She even took my leadership course. It was embarrassing. And today, she works for this firm, what is it called? Deloitte? I forget the name. She's with Deloitte, and what is she doing right now while we're keeping the grandchildren? My wife and I. She's attending a 2-day workshop where she's learning a whole bunch of stuff. And that makes her happy and makes me happy too. So Deloitte does do that. Am I right about that? Yeah. So that's what you want to look for. Things that you can make sure that you have the opportunity to continue to learn and grow. One final comment. When I finished my PhD a long time ago at the University of Texas, my major professor said to me at the time, you know, a PhD is nothing more than a license to learn. Never forgotten that. One of the things that I hope you will learn in this program is how to learn better than you've learned before, and continue to do that. Good luck tonight. We got 30 firms here. I can remember when we had 0. So take advantage of it. Good luck.